Have you ever found yourself in a season where everything feels still? The phone stops ringing, the crowd disappears, and suddenly you're left with just yourself. It's easy to assume that being alone means something is wrong, that we've failed, been forgotten, or somehow fallen out of favor with God. But what if this silence, this solitude, is not punishment, but preparation? Absolutely. Here's an expanded version of ***, key point 1 *** within the context of your speech, written in a warm, insightful, and natural tone, as though it's being delivered live on stage. You know, sometimes when life gets quiet, when friends fall away, plans fall apart, and you're left in a room with just your thoughts, you start to ask, why am I alone? And it's a fair question. In those moments, it's easy to believe that something went wrong. Maybe you blame yourself. Maybe you think God has turned his back on you. But what if I told you that being alone is not a setback, but a setup for something greater than you can even imagine? I want you to think about the people in the Bible that God used in mighty ways. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness. David was out in the fields with sheep long before he ever held a crown. Even Jesus, before he stepped into public ministry, was led by the Spirit into the wilderness. Alone, you see, God does some of his best work in the silence, in the shadows, in the places where nobody is watching. When he pulls you away from everything and everyone you're used to leaning on, he's not punishing you. He's preparing you. There are some lessons God can only teach you in isolation, because let's be honest, when we're surrounded by people, distractions, and noise, it's easy to lose sight of who we really are. We perform, we compare, we try to keep up appearances, but when God allows a season where it's just you and him, he's saying, let's strip all that away. Let me show you who you really are and what I placed inside you. In solitude, God builds spiritual muscle. He trains your focus, he fine-tunes your heart. It's where purpose starts to take root. But most of us miss this because we're too busy trying to escape it. We run from loneliness. We fill it with people who don't belong in our lives. We chase distractions, relationships, status, likes, validation. Anything to avoid sitting still. Anything to avoid feeling alone. But God's saying, don't fight this season. Embrace it. I'm doing something in you that crowds can't do, that applause can't do, that even your best friend can't do. You might not see it now, but you're in training. You're being molded, refined, and sharpened, not for where you are, but for where you're going, and what you're learning in this season, you'll carry that with you into the next. Now, let me say this: preparation seasons can be uncomfortable, because they require pruning. They demand stillness. And when you're used to being surrounded, used to being busy, being alone feels like you're falling behind. But don't confuse silence with absence. Just because it's quiet doesn't mean God isn't working. The seed does its deepest growing underground. Nobody sees it, but it's getting stronger. Some of you are wondering why God hasn't opened the door yet. Why the relationship ended, why the job opportunity fell through. But God might be saying, you're not being rejected, you're being protected. You're not being delayed, you're being developed. There's something in you that needs to be fortified in the quiet, because the weight of your calling would crush you if he gave it to you too soon. Think of it like this: you don't send a soldier to battle without training. You don't build a house on soft ground. You lay the foundation first, and that takes time, alone time, deep time, but it's worth it. Don't despise the quiet. Don't resent the solitude. Instead, ask yourself, God, what are you trying to show me here? Because when you allow him to do his work in you during the quiet seasons, you come out on the other side with clarity, with purpose, and with power. Being alone is not a sign that you're losing. It's often the first sign that God is getting ready to do something new in your life. Something that doesn't require you to be surrounded by everyone, but to be grounded in him. So if you're in a season of solitude right now, don't panic. Don't rush it. And for God's sake, don't try to fill it with things that were never meant to sustain you. Let it shape you. Let it refine you. Let it prepare you, because where God is taking you next, you'll need the strength you gained while you were alone. You ever notice how hard it is to hear yourself think when you're in a crowded room? So much noise, so many voices. Everybody got something to say. And most of the time, the loudest voice isn't even the truth. It's just the most familiar. We've gotten so used to living in the noise that silence feels strange. But that silence, that's where God does the talking. See, when God brings you into a season of being alone, He's not just trying to separate you from people. He's trying to separate you from the noise. Because sometimes what's keeping you from hearing God's voice is the fact that you're tuned in to everybody else's, friends, family, the internet, social media. It's a constant stream of opinions. Everyone telling you who you should be, what you should want, how you should live. And after a while you start confusing their voice for God's voice. You start chasing things He never told you to chase. You start building a life that fits other people's version of success, not the one He designed for you. So what does God do? He gets quiet. He clears the room. He silences the noise. And suddenly it's just you and Him. Not to punish you, but to finally get your attention. And let me tell you, when God speaks in that quiet, it hits different. You start to realize you've been looking for clarity in the wrong places. You don't need a crowd to confirm what God already whispered in your spirit. I remember a time when I was praying for direction, looking for answers, and all I got was silence. No sign, no confirmation, just stillness. And that stillness made me uncomfortable. But then I realized the silence wasn't empty, it was full of the space God needed to speak into. He was saying, asterisk, now that I finally have your ear, let me show you who I am. Let me show you who you are. Asterisk, you can't hear that when you're distracted. You can't hear that when you're too busy performing. That's why God will pull you away. Not forever, but long enough to recalibrate your ears to His voice. Because once you hear God clearly, you stop guessing yourself. You stop looking for confirmation from people who were never assigned to your destiny in the first place. See, we want God to speak through burning bushes, signs in the sky, loud miracles. But most of the time, He speaks in a whisper. A whisper you can only catch when you're still. And the truth is, you'll never hear the whisper if you're always surrounded by noise. That whisper is your next step, your answer, your breakthrough. But you gotta be close enough, quiet enough to catch it. Think about this. When someone whispers, you have to lean in. You have to draw closer. And maybe that's the whole point. Maybe God's not shouting at you because He wants you to lean into Him, to draw closer. To let go of every other voice and say, asterisk, God, I'm ready to hear you now. Asterisk that moment of stillness, that moment of solitude, that sacred space. And what you hear in that space will carry you through everything else that's coming. Because once you've heard God's voice, really heard it, no other voice can confuse you. You won't be swayed by opinions. You won't be distracted by noise. You'll know who you are and what you are called to do. So if you feel like you're in a season where everything's gone quiet, don't panic. God might be drawing you closer, not because you're forgotten, but because you're favored, not because He's distant, but because He's intimate. He wants you to lean in, and when you do, when you finally tune out the world and tune into Him, you'll realize the voice you've been needing to hear was never out there. It was always right here. Sometimes God has to take you to a place of silence, just so you can finally hear what He's been saying all along. There's something uncomfortable about being alone, not just physically alone, but emotionally alone. It's in those moments when the phone doesn't ring, when the house is too quiet, when the laughter fades and the silence starts pressing in. And in that silence, all the stuff you thought you buried starts showing up again. The pain, the fear, the insecurity, the disappointment, it rises to the surface like it's been waiting for this exact moment to remind you it never left. That's when it gets real. But let me tell you something, that's not a sign of weakness. That's not failure, that's not punishment, that's part of the healing. Because sometimes God needs to let you sit still long enough for all those wounds to come up, so He can deal with them. See, as long as you're distracted, as long as you're running, you never really face what's broken inside. You cover it, you manage it, you dress it up, but you don't heal it. So when God allows a season of solitude, He's not trying to hurt you. He's trying to heal you. He's saying, asterisk, let's get to the root of that pain. Let's deal with that heartbreak you never processed. Let's talk about that rejection you buried. Let's clean out what you've been covering up. Asterisk, and listen, healing isn't always beautiful. It can be messy. It can be painful, but it's necessary. Because if you don't heal it, you'll carry it. And what you carry in silence will eventually show up in the places you're trying to grow. Some of us are walking into relationships, careers, opportunities still bleeding from wounds we never acknowledged, still carrying bitterness, still holding on to lies someone else told us about our worth. And God says, asterisk, before I elevate you, I need to restore you. Asterisk, not because you're not enough, but because He loves you too much to let you live half healed. You don't build a strong life on a broken foundation. And you can't pour clean water out of a cracked vessel, so yeah, being alone might hurt, but it's in that hurt that the healing begins. It's where you finally sit with yourself and stop pretending. It's where you get honest with God and say, asterisk, I'm tired of carrying this. I'm tired of pretending I'm okay. Help me, asterisk, and that's when things start shifting, not always overnight, not with fireworks. But in slow, deep, powerful ways, you start recognizing patterns. You start seeing how you've been running from things instead of facing them. You start understanding why certain relationships never worked, not because you were unlovable, but because you were trying to fill a void only God could heal. You start noticing how much of your worth was tied up in other people's opinions, and how freeing it is to finally release that. And here's what's beautiful about this process. God doesn't meet you with shame, He meets you with grace. He doesn't say, asterisk, look at all your mess. Asterisk, He says, asterisk, I see it and I'm still here. I love you too much to leave you in it. Asterisk, He brings healing, not by ignoring your pain, but by walking through it with you. Step by step, layer by layer. Now let me be real with you. There will be days where you feel like nothing's changing, like the loneliness is stretching longer than it should, like the healing is taking too long. But trust this, God is doing more in you than you can see. Every tear, every prayer, every moment you choose to sit with Him instead of running away, He's using all of it, not just to heal you, but to prepare you to carry peace. Real peace. Not peace that depends on circumstances or people, but peace that lives inside you. The kind that says, asterisk, I know who I am and I know who walks with me. Asterisk, and once you walk through that healing, once you come out of that solitude with your head high and your heart whole, you won't look for validation the same way anymore. You won't settle for what used to keep you company. You'll know your worth. You'll know your strength. You'll know what it cost you to be whole again, and you won't let anything or anyone cheapen that. So, if God's got you in a season where you're facing some things alone, it's not because He's breaking you down, it's because He's building you up from the inside out. You ever look in the mirror and realize you don't really know who's looking back at you? I'm talking about those seasons in life where you start questioning everything. Your worth, your purpose, your identity. That's what happens when everything you used to define yourself by gets stripped away. The relationship ends, the job is gone, the recognition dries up, the people who used to clap for you go silent, and suddenly you're alone with one burning question, asterisk, who am I without all that? Asterisk, that's a tough place to be, but hear me, it's a holy place. Because when God pulls you into solitude, He's not just trying to take you away from the world. He's trying to reconnect you to who you really are, not the version of you that had to perform for love, not the version of you that lived for applause, but the version of you He created before you ever had to prove anything to anybody. See, most of us go through life attaching our identity to things outside of us. We say, asterisk, I'm somebody because I'm successful, asterisk or asterisk, I'm worthy because I'm needed, asterisk or asterisk, I'm valuable because people like me, asterisk. But what happens when those things are gone? When nobody's calling, when the titles are gone? That's when you find out what you really believe about yourself. That's when you find out what you've been standing on all along. And that's exactly why God will allow you to be alone for a season. Because when all the noise fades and the spotlight disappears, you're forced to face the foundation. And if that foundation is built on people's opinions or external success, it's gonna crumble. But if it's built on truth, on who God says you are, then you're unshakable. Sometimes God has to strip away everything you thought defined you, just to show you who you are in Him. He'll let the job go, He'll let the relationship walk, He'll allow the platform to go quiet, not because He wants to hurt you, but because He wants to free you, because anything that defines you outside of Him will eventually limit you. And God doesn't want you limited, He wants you liberated. Being alone teaches you that your value doesn't come from what you do or who you're connected to. It comes from who you are, and who you are is not up for debate. You are chosen, you are loved, you are enough, not because you earned it, not because you achieved it, but because you were created on purpose for a purpose. But here's the thing, until you believe that for yourself, you'll keep searching for it in other people. You'll keep trying to fill the emptiness with validation, approval, attention. And the moment someone stops clapping for you, you'll start doubting yourself again. That's why the alone season is so important. It's where God separates you long enough for you to stop seeking who you are in others and start discovering who you are in Him. Let me tell you something. When you find your identity in God, you stop needing people to complete you. You stop begging to be seen. You stop shrinking yourself just to fit into spaces that were never meant for you in the first place. You start walking differently, talking differently, loving yourself differently. Because now you know, you were never created to be defined by the world. You were created to reflect the one who made you. That kind of identity, it's unshakable. Storms can't move it. Rejection can't break it. Loneliness can't distort it. When you've spent time in solitude learning who you are in God, no season can make you forget it, and you know what's wild. Once you finally get to that place, once you stop chasing identity in the crowd, you become someone people can't ignore. Not because you're loud, but because you're grounded, because there's a quiet strength in you, a confidence that doesn't need to prove itself, a peace that doesn't depend on circumstance, and that kind of person changes rooms without trying, impacts lives without forcing it, and walks into destiny without fear. So if you're in a season right now where you feel alone, and you're wondering what it all means, maybe God is trying to show you who you really are. Maybe He's stripping away the labels and titles and noise, just so you can finally see the masterpiece He's been shaping all along.